Welcome to All Power to the Developing, a podcast of the Eastside Institute, where social justice, human development, and community building come together. This is where you will meet activists, artists, teachers, scholars, helpers, and healers who are bringing creativity, hope, and possibility to individuals and communities all over the world. Welcome everyone to All Power to the Developing. This is your host, Desire Wandan, Des for short. I hope everyone is doing well out there. We're off to a very great summer. Performing the World is right around the corner, and we hope that everyone's going to be there with us. As this summer rolls on, I hope everyone stays hydrated. This heat is through the roof, but we know that we're global. So you may be in the rain, you may be in the snow still, you may be in the wind, but we're all here together on All Power to the Developing. Today, I have a very, very special guest, someone who I had the pleasure of meeting at Seeding Fractals Conference in Washington, D.C., which is a conference for community arts education. Malia Gilbert-Neal is a Philadelphia native and executive director of Artwell. For the last 3 years, she has focused on out-of-school time enrichment for the youth living in low poverty levels. Malia's development work over the last 3 decades spanned a variety of focus areas, including the impact of poverty on educational access and outcomes, social emotional learning, OST enrichment, early childhood education, literacy, skill development, career pathways, vocational trade education, and summer learning loss prevention. What a list of things. Malia, welcome to All Power to the Developing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we first met at Seeding Fractals. That was an amazing workshop that you did. I happened to be a part of that. As soon as I read it on the app, I was like, okay, I'm definitely attending this. But before we go into that, I would like to kind of get into your personal journey, how you came into the work that you're currently doing, or was that always your path to get into the world of arts and education? So where does the story from Malia Gilbert-Neal come from? Where do you originate from? How did you get into your work?
Yeah, well, using the word originate, I have to say that I'm from Philly. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and went away for a while, went to college in Chicago and lived there for 4 years. And interestingly, I went to DePaul, and a fellowship that I participated in that helped to pay for my schooling was through the Stain Center. I was a community service minor. So I was a double major in communications and English, but I also had this minor that required me to go into neighborhoods all over Chicago and learn about the nonprofit sector, and to write papers, to have discussions, to attend a practicum every single week that really focused on how the sector was functioning and how it was helping to fill gaps that were, largely were and are needs that are unmet by the government. And that was a really unique experience that I got to have, because one, I was in Chicago, which is extremely diverse, has some of the largest concentrations of different populations in our country, huge Polish populations, Ethiopian populations, Mexican populations, the Black American population too. And there's so much richness in the city. And then when you have the opportunity to also think about how, the needs of the community, that was really, what I was doing there. It was an amazing experience. And so that really, I think, catapulted me into the nonprofit space. From DePaul, I went to University of Delaware and studied public administration. And it was an interesting time because I was graduating from University of Delaware in 2010, which was the height of the recession. And, there were not a lot of job opportunities for a lot of folks. who were leaving school at that time. There were a lot of government programs that were suspended, for example. And, instead of kind of focusing on government and public administration, I ended up in the university's alumni relations office, and also doing some work in the advancement office for the university. And so I was um, having another really unique experience where I am now exposed to fundraising and partnerships and what it looks like to engage stakeholders at a major institution. And that really set me on a path of partnerships um, and fundraising and development. And so, from there, I went to the Salvation Army, worked in the partnerships office where I was helping to build strong ties between the local government and the Salvation Army as an entity. And the Salvation Army is a huge organization, it's a global organization. And I worked for the headquarters in Philly that served Eastern Pennsylvania. So that included Philadelphia, included, almost up to Pittsburgh. And so that it was an experience that really shaped my understanding of how important it is for communities to be infused with dollars, and where those dollars come from, and just all the politicking that happens to make funds available to communities. It opened my eyes to why, some communities have these severe deficits because of being overlooked, discrimination, racism, all these things. And so that really was my foundation for getting into all of those things kind of coming together, was the foundation for me in terms of getting into fundraising. And I stayed in fundraising, for the bulk of my career, and just pivoted into nonprofit leadership probably about 6 years ago, due to the fact that most of my fundraising experience was related to education initiatives. And I had also done some work with youth in the past, at DePaul, in my leaving graduate school as well. And so just these factors of knowing how to raise money, knowing how to tell compelling stories, all those things, again, coalesce to push me in the direction of nonprofit leadership, where I've been now since 2018.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you so much for sharing. You named so many different community-based services. You named so many different community-based operations that you're part of, and you kind of went across this journey. What led you in the beginning to want to take that minor course and even be interested in the community-based work? Community-based work, I think people think is just something you stroll in and you just start working with people, but it's actually very challenging. Some would say even more challenging than a traditional path. So what initially got you into that field to dig in so deep and start going into these communities? Like, what was it within you that you felt so passionate to be a part of these community initiatives to begin with?
That's a really interesting question, and one that I really haven't thought about. But I think what comes to mind is the fact that there's a really strong tie for me professionally and personally. My personal experience mirrors my professional experience in terms of out of school time learning for young people, because my whole academic trajectory was established when I started participating in a program called Indwelling that was designed to take, quote unquote, inner city youth, quote unquote, promising inner city youth, and help them to get into academically rigorous schools and college preparatory schools. So I participated in this program called Indwelling. That was this tiny after school program that was run by a nun and a brother. It was associated with a Catholic church. And, this was their life's work. Like, they just rallied around getting kids, putting kids on a better path. And, you have to take that sometimes with a grain of salt, because we don't know what our paths will be and how certain, how certain decisions impact us over the long term. But their goal definitely was to help set young people, young Black and Latinx people up for success by helping them to have more educational opportunities. So I went to this, K through 8. I went to this very poor Catholic school, all Black. And then because I participated in indwelling, I was then able to go to a college preparatory Quaker high school called Abington Friends in Philly. We have a lot of Quaker schools, and many of them, are standards for academic excellence. They're standards for a lot of other things too, like, they center hyper white wealth. A lot of them are diverse in ways, but you typically are not seeing, like, it doesn't mirror the city. Philly is predominantly Black. Philly is like 50% Black. Definitely doesn't mirror, what Philadelphia looks like. Most of the time, a child of color goes into these spaces and they are one of very few. In my high school class, I was one of, maybe 3 Black girls. There were maybe 2 or 3 Black boys, something like that. Very, very small concentration of people of color. And then, there were Asian people too, and maybe a few Latinx people. But I bring that up to say that that participating in indwelling really gave me an appreciation as an adult for out of school time programming and how out of school time programs are foundational and so important to the Black community. Like my mom, who's a single mom and a teacher, really relied on out of school time programming to make sure that her kids were safe. There were 3 of us, that her kids were safe, that her kids were getting the enrichment that they needed to be successful, that they were in good hands. And I think a lot of parents, whether you are a single parent or not, in the Black community depend on programs like indwelling and other, big sister, big brother programs. The list is really long. The YMCA, all these programs strengthen the community and are really, really important because kids are doing something really positive and beneficial to them in the long run. So participating in indwelling got me this, scholarship to a Quaker school, went through for 4 years, did, community service as well and community engagement while I was in high school. I was president of my class. So, there was, in 12th grade, I was president of my class. And I think that all these things built up to my own desire to continue building community and to continue community organizing. When I got to college, I started an organization with some friends called Strong. That was an affinity group for Black women. And that organization still exists today, which is amazing. And it demonstrates that there's just always going to be a need for spaces that are nurturing to folks and that helps people to experience belonging. And I think that that's just a through line in my work with young people and also, now the Seeding Fractals conference, where I'm talking about how we create, workplaces that really see people and help people to experience inclusion and belonging and equity, and places where people can show up as their full selves. So I think that that's the story arc. I'm just kind of, piecing these things together in real time as we talk. But, I think it's all of those things kind of working together.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
And I love people.
That sounds like such an amazing story, and it really lends to the impact that people could have on someone. Like when you said the gentleman and his partner that started the program you were part of. Like that just reminds me.
So
go ahead.
They weren't married. One was a nun and one was a brother. So they like took a vow of celibacy. Like they lived in the convent. I don't know what a brother lives in, but they essentially dedicated their lives to missionary work, God's work, and they saw their missionary field like as being in the East Germantown section of Philly and helping Black kids have more educational opportunities.
Yeah. Wherever they are, thank you to y'all, because you did an amazing job with Malia. Can you share a little bit about the organization you started in college, Strong? You said you started a group with, can you share, because that when
Yeah,
I heard that, that
strong,
was, and you
strong
said it still goes to this
is an
day.
acronym that stands for Sisters Together, Recognizing Our Never-Ending Growth. That was a very long acronym that we chose. And it essentially started off as like a group of 4 or 5 friends who were like really tight since freshman year. And we decided that, many of us were looking at the possibility of joining a sorority, like becoming a Delta or an AKA or something like that. And I think that many of us could not at that time because there were like suspensions of the chapter where, things going on, personal things too. And we just felt like, there needs to be more organization around like creating spaces where Black girls can get together, talk about things that are happening on campus, talk about, human development as a woman, this journey, this collegiate journey, the journey into womanhood and what happens after college. And so we started this organization and, we were able to raise money and we called it Operation Cinderella. And we raised money to send a girl from Chicago. She lived on the South Side to prom. We raised the cost for her whole prom and did some of those, you know, what I would call just like meeting needs that were there, figuring out how we can support other women, other young girls. We some of us still stay in touch. Some of us still stay in touch with the girl that we donated prom cups to as well, which has been, it's been beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think at the center of it, it was just another way for us to build community in a way that we felt was needed.
Yeah. So when I hear you talk, the thing I get from you is you build these environments that people need. And when I met you at Seeding Fractals, I think we met just informally, just eating food or whatever, looking at whatever they had to offer. Then you told me, "Oh, your workshop is later," and I looked at it. I was like, "Oh, looks like an amazing workshop." As a participant in your workshop, I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt, you created such a therapeutic environment, an immersive environment, and you allowed people to really share personal things. Some of the things I shared in your iceberg exercise, which we'll talk about, I don't even think I've spoken to close people with me about. Some of the things, the gentleman next to me, I remember there was a gentleman next to me, we were talking, kind of laughing. He shared some very personal things. I remember the young lady that spoke about her autoimmune disease and how she felt people didn't see that of her because she was stylish and she dressed really nice. People never saw that aspect of her. Can you just speak about your process in which you created this workshop, and was it your intent to get all the way down and dirty like that with us? Because that's where we went, and I think that's where we needed to go because it was such a relevant conversation, at this moment in time.
Yeah, I want to answer that question by starting with like the conference theme. So the idea of seeding fractals, the idea of fractals is discussed at length in Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. And Adrienne Maree Brown talks a lot about fractals in nature and how, we have to examine the ways that we communicate with one another and look to nature as a guide in doing that and in creating more connection. And Adrienne Maree Brown talks about, mushrooms and how mushrooms have this really complex web, and network underneath the ground, and they use it to communicate about danger. And trees are very similar. And Adrienne Maree Brown essentially asks us to look at fractals, these repeating patterns in nature, to design, systems and communities that work better for us, and to lean into the wisdom of nature in that way. That we have to stay connected, we have to be communicating, and we have to just be examining things and nurturing each other. One of the things that she points out about mushrooms is that, they help a lot of other things to proliferate, to get stronger. They can also, filter out impurities. And so I think a lot about what that means for us, us as a human species, like how are we nurturing each other, keeping each other whole. And so with this idea of seeding fractals in mind, I wanted to focus on just being a human at work and looking at the human experience a little bit holistically. And I think that what resonated for me in this time, because this is a lot of work that I'm doing with Artwell, is thinking about wellness and what, creating a culture of wellness really means and what you need to sustain that. So thinking about the conference theme and also thinking about my lived experience at Artwell really shaped my workshop. And I think it's important to say too that, I will have been at Artwell for 2 years in September. So I'm relatively new to the organization, but not only that, I came in at a time where, the organization's leader and founder of 22 years had left. There was kind of like a vacuum of leadership. There was a big exodus of the senior leadership team. So the organization was in a state of, just needing to be nurtured in some ways. And so me coming in, I really wanted to focus on ways that I can nurture my team and make everyone feel safe and appreciated and knitted together. And so a lot of those ideas are now in our strategic plan that, will be released soon. And it's a 5-year plan, and a big focus of it is wellness. So that all of those things kind of coming together was the foundation of my workshop.
So just seeing where the deficit was, where, the deficiencies were, you just looked at that and you decided, this is how I'm going to approach this workshop, speaking about, this human experience at work.
Yeah, and I think also it's important to also say that, I work in the arts and culture sector. I'm not an artist. I don't have a background in arts and culture. But one thing that was apparent to me coming into this field is that, the arts community has a lot of needs because a lot of folks turn to art because they've been pushed to the margins in a lot of ways. So they've experienced discrimination, they've experienced marginalization and minoritization in some really profound ways. I think a lot of people take advantage of artists as well. And so knowing that also really made me want to examine all the ways that I could create a culture that really uplifted, that was really human-centered and focused on wellness.
Yeah. What was your response, like, post-workshop? It was a great, hour and a half. What was your takeaway as the person that was leading the workshop? After it's done, you heard all of us speak. We heard you speak. You were amazing. It was an amazing workshop. When I left the workshop and people were going to different spaces, we were still talking about it. Some of the people were talking to each other about different things. Some people continued writing. I saw. What was your takeaway from the workshop as the person that led it, and how did it impact you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying all those all those wonderful things. I think I felt really good about the workshop. And I think one of the things that you said in your previous question was, you asked me if I expected everyone to get down and dirty, in the content. So, in my presentation, I asked people to think about, what parts of them show up at work and what parts of them have to hide. And we had a dialogue about it. And I was also practicing with everyone. I didn't have an expectation that everyone would, reveal the most intimate parts of, things that they struggle with, or parts of their personality or parts of their experience. But it was really important for me to practice vulnerability in that space, not just openness. And it's very important to think about the difference between being open and being vulnerable. The openness is like, yeah, I can tell you something about my life and share details, but vulnerability is sharing deeper aspects of myself that are uncomfortable. And I think that, for one, the fact that the room was packed, and that was a shock to me, that we were literally pulling in chairs to get people to fill in, really made me feel good about how many people wanted to talk about wellness in the workplace and what that looks like. And then I felt heartened also that so many people were willing to engage on the content and share. I didn't force anyone to share out, but people shared out about, feeling like they have to hide ADHD at work, or depression, or the fact that they're young, or feeling like people see them as inexperienced. I mean, these are all things that are very difficult to acknowledge to yourself. And I think it's doubly difficult to acknowledge to a crowd. It was definitely difficult for me to acknowledge some of the ways that, some of my own experiences. I shared, about being a queer woman, which is something that I don't talk openly about. I also have not talked about my experiences in any detail with anyone about childhood sexual abuse, but it's definitely a part of my story. And the reason I don't share is because I have shame about it. And even though it's not my fault, and this is a thing that people experience often, but I have shame, and I have fear that people will look at me as damaged, or as someone who is hurting in some way. And, I'm a strong person. I've really weathered so many things in my life, and I think too, though, there are parts of me that are soft and vulnerable and tender because of the things that I've experienced. And I want other leaders to create spaces where we can nurture and accept and love and celebrate the parts of us that are fully developed, and the parts of us that are still like wounded and tender. And, to recognize that all of your employees, your team, are coming in with all these things that can make work more challenging, can make creating a cohesive team more challenging. And, that was the overall goal, to just get everyone to be thinking of themselves as folks who are coming into contact with people who have lived very complex lives. I think that, leaving the room, I just felt really happy. I felt the love in that room, even with people working through some very challenging ideas, maybe for the first time. It felt really good to just create community and bonding, and around what it looks like to say, like, none of us are okay, and we still have to show up to work, because that is the truth. None of us are okay. One of the things that I pointed out in my session was that 80% of Americans are experiencing anxiety related to the upcoming election. And this is huge. Like, this is a time in our human existence where many of us are scared about how things will feel racially, from a sexual orientation perspective, from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, if a certain person is in power. In the debate that happened between Trump and Biden, they were casually using the term World War III, and like, I could not believe that debate and how it went, and some of the topics of conversation, but it's scary to me. And I know that if I'm scared as a leader and walking around with this fear and coming into work with this fear, other people have it too, and they just may not feel empowered to acknowledge how much just the times are weighing on them. So
yeah,
I just wanted folks to consider all those things.
It was absolutely amazing, and also you just spoke so much about kind of the complexity of how do you, with all of these elements of yourself, the both the positive and the negative, how do you take those things and still kind of persist and move forward? Not move forward in spite of those things or to hide those things, but with all of those elements, using them, even the good and the bad, how do you continue to move forward with them? And I think your workshop definitely spoke of that. People sharing some of the things of themselves that, like you said, we hide. But how do we? I like to say, how do we use those things that we hide and to empower us to move forward? And you really spoke to that, and you really gave so much of yourself. So I really want to thank you for that workshop. And we're gonna take a short commercial break. When we return, we're going to speak more with Malia about Artwell, and we're going to hear all about how it started and how many people the organization continues to impact. More on that on All Power to the Developing.
Hi, I'm Melissa Meyer, Associate Director of the Eastside Institute. Welcome to All Power to the Developing. I hope you're enjoying today's conversation. In each episode, we introduce you to some amazing performance activists, play revolutionaries, and developmentalists from around the world who talk to us about their creative grassroots efforts to build a better world. If you like what you hear, please follow and share the series. You can find us on Amazon, Spotify, and Podbean. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas. Like everything at the Institute, the growth of All Power to the Developing depends upon the people who create it and benefit from it. We hope you're one of them. Thanks for your support, and now back to our conversation.
Welcome back to All Power to the Developing. I hope everyone is enjoying the episode so far. We're going to speak about Artwell. Artwell was founded in 2000 to respond to the chronic community violence in Philadelphia by introducing a preventative, educational, arts-oriented approach to reach underserved communities and the youth facing discrimination, poverty, violence, and the everyday challenges of growing up. Our mission is to support, or their mission is to support, young people and their communities through multidisciplinary arts, expression, education, and creative reflection to celebrate their strengths, thrive while they're facing complex challenges, and awaken their dreams. Absolutely amazing. You spoke a little bit about Artwell before we went to commercial break. Speak a little bit about the organization. It's been since 2000, and as I just read, it was a response to chronic community violence. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, Artwell has a really interesting history because it was founded, a lot of the work started to grow right after 9/11 because in Philly there was growing anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic sentiment in a lot of communities. And Artwell, the founder, Susan Teigen, started it, wanted to use art as a way to bridge gaps, to create bridges between, differing communities, people of different walks of life, different faith communities. And so the start of Artwell was really focusing on large community-based programs like, communities coming together to create murals and mosaics and peace gardens and things like that. And it has evolved to now focus more so on bringing arts into schools. So that is our primary function today. And I've now been with Artwell for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in September as executive director. Our focus is primarily on bringing two core programs into schools. One is We the Poets, and that focuses on helping young people to access poetry and to decipher poetry and to learn about poetry as a tool for self-expression and healing. And then the Art of Growing Leaders is for adolescents. And so that has an older demographic of students. And it focuses on helping young people to redefine the idea of leadership and to understand themselves as leaders within their communities and to identify social issues that they care about and to kind of create pathways for themselves to either get involved or become advocates or to, to use activism and to understand activism as a tool that is readily available to them in a variety of ways. And so all of our programs, and we're relaunching a program that used to run called Eco Arts, and that focuses on helping young people to use art as a tool to become stewards of the earth and to understand themselves as stewards of the earth, which I love is so timely. I think that, when you live in a city and when you live in such a compacted city like Philly too, and maybe you've experienced this being in New York, I think that a lot of people can experience a lot of separation from the earth, the ground,
absolutely,
nature, and I think Philly is a really green city. There's a lot of beautiful space to inhabit, but that was certainly my experience growing up. I wasn't, running through fields and going to the Wissahickon often, things like that. I was playing on the asphalt playground, and playing double dutch in the street. That was my childhood, which I loved, but also as an adult, I now have a newfound appreciation for being in nature, hearing water, and how all those things are soothing to the nervous system. So there is a really important component in all of our work that focuses on helping young people to learn to regulate emotions and using art as a way to do that. Journaling, drawing, painting, collage work, all these things are really meditative in nature. And I think that is really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to equip young people with is tools to find inner peace and to hold on to inner peace and to build connections as well and community.
What have you been seeing among the young people in terms of their development from maybe first coming into Artwell straight from their neighborhood, and then now they've been in Artwell for about a year or maybe 6 months or 3 months, or what have you been seeing in the youth, their development throughout? Because these sound like three amazing initiatives. I think when I think about when I was growing up, poetry was such a big part of growing up. Like there was poetry slams, there were poetry contests in the city. You did poetry at school. You had a crush on a girl, you might write poetry. You had a crush on someone, you might write a little poetry.
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did that. I think we all kind of went through that phase. Having a crush on someone, you write a little poem to them. And then you're going into leadership, which I think is such a very underserved conversation in our community. What is a leader? What does it mean to be a leader? A lot of people are leaders and don't even know you're a leader. If you could get your 10 friends to go play basketball with you, that's leadership.
Right.
And
yes.
And then you're going into the green spaces, the ecosystem. So these are three major initiatives. What are you seeing in the youth when they are part of this?
I wish the listeners could see how big the smile is that I have, because this is one of my favorite questions. Like, the outcomes are everything. What we see is, and we collect data, so we evaluate our programs by asking students in the very beginning and very end, like what their experience is with art. And what we find year after year is that, one, and this is really important, young people feel like they can trust the teaching artists, like Artwell teaching artists. And trust is a big factor because there's, all the aggregated research points to feeling like you have engaging teachers as being the most important indicator of success overall. You kids really thrive when they feel like their teachers care about them and take an interest in them. And the fact that young people love our teaching artists and build these relationships over time is really critical. They also say that they feel like their points of view matter in class, which is also huge. So they're developing confidence and a desire to share. They indicate that they feel more confident in sharing their opinion as well. And then, we also collect like qualitative data. So we just ask these open-ended questions, and students say things like, I used to be angry, but I'm not angry anymore, which is like, yes, or feel, some students have said, and I'm just spouting off some of my favorite quotes from last year's evaluations. One student said that, they felt calm when Artwell was present, or they felt that every time Artwell came, the mood changed in a positive way. So the fact that there are multiple things happening when young people are making comments like that. Like, one, they're tapping into their own kind of emotional vocab, shifts in their moods. Some adults can't even do that. Some adults can't even name like how they're feeling. So the fact that students are learning themselves emotionally and being able to articulate, like, this was my mood before and this is my mood now, is huge. That is emotional, building up an emotional vocabulary and an emotional intelligence. And then the fact that they're experiencing these shifts too is positive. Like, they're coming out of some of those, emotions that can be really hindering, like anger, feeling upset, and all those things are really good. But we see that students feel more confident. They feel connected to teaching artists. They feel, happy that Artwell is there, and all those things just infuse the school day with something to look forward to. And I think that, kids need that novelty. Students need that novelty to feel excited about coming to school and to feel connected to school. So we're, helping to create more cohesion in the school environment, which I love.
And it sounds like this is having an amazing impact on the youth. So by proxy, I would imagine it's kind of having an impact on the parents also, right? Have you heard anything from the parents? Are the parents now wanting to take their shoes off in the grass? Or are they now wanting to write a little bit of poetry with their kids? Like, have you seen a response also from the parents? How have the parents reacted to
That's the hope. So where we see parents, so because we're in the school and in the school day, we don't get to see parents as much. What we do get to see parents, though, is at our end of year celebration. So we have this big art show. This year it was held at Moore College of Art and Design, and it was beautiful. And parents attended, and some parents were able to see, like, their students' work. One of our students from Parkway Northwest wrote a beautiful poem just about performative allyship, just so deep, so dope. And, the parents were there, got to see that. The family got to see him perform. The Youth Poet Laureate of Philadelphia also performed a piece. And so, I think that there's a lot to be proud of in terms of just the creativity of our young people and putting it on display for people, and not, we don't control the work at all, or the product. And so sometimes students are talking about really intimate and vulnerable challenges that they experience, heartbreak, love loss, grieving, loss of loved ones, all these things that, come out. And I feel so grateful that we can create a container for young people to process these emotions in real time and to metabolize it. Like, metabolizing stress and trauma is really important, and metabolizing means like processing it and getting it out of your body. And that's a part of what we're doing, which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Artwell sounds amazing, and I wish I could go back in time and join it as a teenager myself. I would have been a mainstay at that after school.
You can write some more love poems.
Yeah, write some more poetry. Wow, Malia, just your whole journey, everything you're sharing is absolutely not only beautiful, but extremely inspirational. What advice or what words of encouragement do you give to others globally that maybe come from a place where they want to do something? They want to create an environment. They want to make a group, a program. They want to get a couple friends together to do something. Along your journey, what are some words or what are some thoughts that you could give to people to help them along this process for them? What words of encouragement do you have for people?
I think that it's really important to, one, collaborate with people who are around you and have shared values. And that, I think that that's, what I've been doing for a lot of my life is just seeking out people who have values that are similar to mine, so that we can enrich, the spaces around us. And I think that when you do that, the work is much easier and much more fulfilling and joyful because you have people who also care about the community, who care about liberation, who care about, helping us to evolve as a human species. I think too, it's really important to um, ensure that you're loving yourself. I think that this is where I'll bring the wellness back up too, because I think that in these conversations about what it means to be well, we have to, I as a leader have to think about that for my team, but I also have to think about what that means for myself, taking care of my body, taking care of my mental health, ensuring that I'm surrounding myself with people who love me and who, want to pour into me and who are edifying in some way, and making sure that I can do that for other people by first taking care of myself. I think that those are two really important aspects of wanting to do community work. It's like those aspects of wellness are really important.
And speaking of wellness, we're in 2024, we're post-pandemic. There's been a lot of conversation about the workplace, whether to stay in the office, whether to be out of the office, whether to be hybrid, whether to do it this way, working 70 hours versus working this many hours, and the complexity of all of these conversations and the productivity that a company needs from someone or a nonprofit needs from someone. You spoke about wellness and that being a very crucial factor in you feel how successful an organization should be. The staff's wellness, the overall organization's wellness. Can you speak a little bit more to that in this kind of this climate? Why? I mean, we know why it's important, of course, because you can't have a successful company, you can't have a successful nonprofit, or you could, but it's not going to be a healthy workplace for everyone.
Yeah.
Why is this such an important conversation to you today? Like, why do you think this is coming up today as opposed to, I'm sure it's always been an issue, but it seems like today this is a very, very prevalent conversation people want to speak about.
Yeah. I think I think I have to say again that it's important to talk about now because none of us are well. I think that America makes it very hard to be well. And what I mean by that is that we're all experiencing the same capitalism that is, overworking people and underpaying them, expecting people to make huge sacrifices of themselves for the sake of profit and dollars. We're all experiencing the same racism, the same sexism, the same, you know, confrontations on human rights and liberties. We're all watching, certain institutions take money away from what can be called diversity, equity, and inclusion and diverting it to different things. We're just seeing money being taken away from education. We're seeing things, seeing aspects of our government like the police be funded, and to what end? Our communities are not safer. Our communities are, more unsafe in a lot of areas. I think because we're all swimming in all these systems of oppression, it's really important to talk about wellness and how we sustain wellness. I also think that we have to think more globally as well, because we're not just talking about in America, where we know America, there are a lot of policies that are missing to protect people, like the fact that we have a housing shortage right now and the skyrocketing prices of real estate, the fact that people are, just experiencing a worse quality of life in a lot of ways, indicates that there's just not a lot of protections from the government. Things that are going into the food, poisoning young people. and adults, all of us, again, we're all swimming in this. Though that's America, but also we're looking at globally genocide in Palestine. We're looking at all these failures of government and failures of our leader and failures to restore years and years and years of oppression and hurt and violence. So again, all those things make it so that it's hard to be well. It's hard to watch America do what it's doing. It's hard to watch what's happening globally, in Sudan and all these, other areas too, where people are experiencing famine and just wide scale devastation. If you are completely well and happy and, without a care in the world right now, I really have a lot of questions for you.
Yes.
And how you're living and who you're living for. Because I think that it's hard to watch all the things that are happening in America and globally and to just feel completely free. And, I think that I think a lot about this idea of all of us being intertwined. And there was a poet who made this comment that, none of us are living one life. We're living multiple lives at one time because we're all interconnected like a braid. And it's such a beautiful concept. I think that is why I'm in the work that I'm in, because I do see myself as connected to you, Des. I do see myself as connected to all the youth that I'm serving, intimately connected. Like my wellness is your wellness, is their wellness. And, it's the idea that until all of us are free, none of us are free, of course. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why it's important to talk about wellness right now, because it is about liberation. It's about justice. It's about restoration of thousands and thousands of years of harm and violence. And, whatever I can do to help curtail some of that or to make someone's existence a little bit more liberated or joyful, I want to do that because it makes me liberated and joyful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wellness first, everyone. Wellness is first. Lastly, in parting, thank you so much, Malia, for all your time today. We named this podcast All Power to the Developing because we want to give power to everyone who's developing, whether in small ways of just trying something new or whether in large ways of similar to the work that you're doing with Artworld and previous initiatives before. When you hear all power to the developing, what comes to mind for you when you hear that phrase?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is the idea of, we have these ideas about developing nations. And I think that if I say a developing nation, you might think of, a country that's really rural or has a high concentration of poverty, or I think you don't think about America as a developing country, but I think that there are some very specific and vital ways that America still has to develop. I think that when we think about the poverty here, the crime, let's just talk about crime and violence. In the debate, there was this conversation about terrorists and, people who are immigrating into the country, becoming terrorists and being here. And I'm like, bro, the terrorists are the white men who walk into any place and start shooting places up. No one talks about the terrorism that's happening and the crime that's happening at the hands of white men and white male rage in this country. But I think that these are the things that I think about in terms of development, how Americans, in terms of data that I'm looking at, are becoming less educated. Post-pandemic, we're still seeing a lot of enrollment issues at schools. We're seeing a lot of attrition, kids who are older still dropping out. We're seeing declines in college enrollment. So there's a lot of unwellness in American institutions. There's a lot of failure. A lot of it feels there's a lot of feeble. A lot of these systems are just really feeble, and I think that there needs to be a lot of development in American institutions and systems for us to get to a place where we are even functional. I don't even want to say thriving, like
Yeah.
even functional. So, I love that this podcast exists and that you are thinking about what development means in so many areas of life and in so many parts of the world as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Because again, we're all connected.
We are all connected. And speaking of being connected, if people would like to connect with you or learn more about your work, where could they do that?
Yes, if you'd like to learn more about Artwell, you can go to theartwell.org. If you would like to stay connected with me, I'm most active, I would say, on Instagram. I'm at Malia Knows Things. Malia is spelled Malia. I'm sure this podcast will provide some detail there. Similarly, Artwell is on IG at Artwell Philly. That's an area where you can find out more about how we are engaging students and thinking about art as a tool for creativity and reflection and healing in our communities.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Malia Gilbert-Neal, for being on All Power to the Developing. If you would like to write to us and let us know how you love this episode so much, because we know you will, you can email us at podcast@eastsideinstitute.org. Once again, that is podcast@eastsideinstitute.org. Send us an email. Let us know what you love about this episode or previous episodes. Like we said, Performing the World is right around the corner, and it's going to be a great one. So check out performingtheworld.org also and get your tickets. It's going to be an amazing event. All Power to Developing is an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today, and all power to the developing. To the Developing was made possible in part by Growing Social Therapeutics, the Baylor Wolf Fund,